Hello, it's Andy from Folklore Hiking Sticks, and today I'm going to be talking about the very basics of keeping chickens in your garden stroke backyard. This subject is quite in depth with all aspects surrounding it, so I'm only going to touch on the very basics in this video. But yeah, I'll just take you along and I can show you how we do it, manage it, and the reasons for doing it. Just going into the egg compartment, or there were sleeping quarters. No, there's no eggs. A bit early. When they're all laying though, we can expect eggs from this time of day onwards, and it's about 7:30. The weather is extremely murky and misty. Everything's wet, but you can quite clearly see I have a roof over their main run, which does help and alleviates a lot of the mess being brought into their sleeping quarters and then onto the eggs themselves. If you keep more than 2 chickens, or even with 2 chickens, you will see as I suppose you could use the word pecking order. You will have the more dominant ones, which will dominate the food station. So you always have to make sure or ensure that all the chickens are getting to the food at some point during the day. But yes, as you can see here, that white one is the most dominant out of my flock, and it will scare off all the other chickens till it's had its fill of food. So yeah, you do have to monitor what's actually happening, and if you introduce new ones, that will be more exaggerated and it can be violent behaviour. So you have to be aware of that. It will actually look quite brutal because a chicken will peck another chicken's head and they can draw blood. In worst case scenario, they can all gang up on a new chicken and kill it. So you do actually have to be fully aware of that. You can't just put a new chicken in amongst the rest of the other chickens that have an established pecking order. Hi, I've just popped inside because it's getting pretty damp out there with that mist, as I've clearly showed you. It's rolling in and everything. I'm covered in, say, a light drizzle just being out there. Right then, you're either keeping chickens for meat, eggs, in the backyard situation, or as what in a lot of cases I suspect people keep them as a kind of extension to their pets, their home. There's nothing wrong in that, but obviously that I will talk about this later on. That also brings in its own set of problems. Me personally, we stumbled into chicken keeping from my father-in-law, who ended up with a chicken that had a clutch of eggs that were hatched, and in his situation he didn't have the capacity to keep them with the setup he had, so he gave us his old run and that chicken, and that's how we started into it. But more than likely you will have to buy your own setup, which will be the hutch, the chickens themselves, and then manage that situation with the knowledge that you've researched and gained through talking to other people. We were lucky that we had somebody who already knew a little bit to pass that on to us. So you've decided you're going to keep chickens. The next step is where and how. As you can see, I've got a garden, and I immediately decided I didn't want them ranging on their own will, shall I say. Firstly, because I have neighbours that side of me, this side of me, and over the hedge. That is a field which isn't used for domestic purposes, it's more for horses. So I don't really have the capacity to let my chickens just fully roam. Next thing is if they're going to be kept in a hutch, is where you're going to keep it. I've located mine in the bottom of the garden, quite simply because chickens do make a noise, they can smell, and as you can see, you can't get away from the fact where chickens are, you will have to manage any of their furry companions, aka the rat. So yeah, this is my setup. I have a run which is coming to the end of its life, but it is probably one of the more traditional ones you would see, as in a triangle A-frame which has a small run and a sleeping compartment. Now that sleeping compartment is where they also lay. As you can see, one in there now just doing. So I'll shut this back down, but I've got two nesting boxes, and that is because chickens sometimes will queue up to lay their eggs, and if they wait too long they will just dump them wherever they are or go back outside and on the floor. And if they do that, you can end up with a broken egg or other chickens trying to eat that egg. So you do need to have an option for several places for the chickens to lay their eggs. This is my main run, which was salvaged from my father-in-law when he emigrated. As you can see, everything for me to set these chickens up was, shall we say, cheap, and I've made do, mended, and pretty much everything's been done on the cheap. I haven't invested a lot of money. This is the thing, if you're setting up from scratch, you may find yourself having to spend a lot of outlay, and if you're doing it just for eggs, I can promise you could go to our well-known supermarkets and buy eggs cheaper than that you can produce eggs yourself from starting from scratch. But you are doing this pretty much for that, shall we say, from farm to table mentality, where you're producing your own eggs. Once you've got it all set up, it should be reasonably cheap for you to keep chickens. You do need to be sensible about the amount of chickens you keep in a run. This setup that I've got, I can keep 5 quite comfortably, 6 at a push, because obviously they have that bit where they can go into the other run. We put all our grass clippings in here from the year, and it all mulches down, so they got plenty to dig around and entertain themselves. They got some sticks for purchases, because chickens do like to jump up and flap their wings and that, and they got to have somewhere where they can scratch. That is a mandatory thing for them, because it's just part of their nature. You put a chicken anywhere, it will try to scratch at the ground. It's just an inbred thing that they do as part of their feeding process. So yeah, you have to provide them with a decent amount of space, the ability to scratch around, somewhere for them to get off the ground, because that's another natural thing for them. Because they are a prey animal, they do like to jump up and feel safe up on perches. I have 2 in here and 1 in the other compartment up here, where they can just get up there and they do instantly feel safe. It calms them down, particularly if cats are walking around the outside of the structure. It just calms them down. Here in the UK, you're not supposed to feed any chickens domestic or kitchen waste. That is because of diseases and pathogens and illnesses that can be transmitted. I'm not going to tell anybody what's what, but I certainly obey that, because on top of that, when you introduce human kitchen waste, it increases the chances of rodents. I'm using a big heavy duty bowl, which when they stand on, they can't tip it over or knock it anywhere, and that holds their food. I remove that at night. Even if there's still some left in there, I remove the bowl, so there's no chance that there's any food items. I sometimes will remove it an hour before dark, so that the chickens become that little bit more hungry, and they eat any surrounding mess that they've made. I have a big old bread tin which is heavy, yet again they can't tip it over, and that is filled with water. I do that every day, particularly in the summer. This time of year I can refill it once every 2 days, but it holds enough water for them. But they need clean, fresh water, good pellets from a reputable supplier, and like I said, we put grass clippings in, and we will pick grass for the chickens, and they do like grass, so a few handfuls of grass thrown in each day, and with the pellets that produces, should we say, nice eggs. We do put grit in sometimes, chicken grit, which helps with the digestion, and well, basically it helps their digestive system with their food inside their gullet. But this is built on soil, and they will scratch down and pick up small stones and that themselves, so we don't need to, as much as what you might do, to put artificial grit, or oyster shell as they call it, in their food. With the advent of avian flu that was or is still around, sometimes you're required to keep them housed indoors. Obviously I don't have that facility, so I've had to do the best I can, which is I then block this part of the runoff through that door there, so they can only move within this area. And I've got loads of like sheeting which I break down over here, and I've got some more which I can then fold over. That's all up there. I fold it all down, block the side bits, so I only have light through that triangle piece there, as you can see there. So they get light through the triangle piece over there, but I can skirt it all off, so they are housed away from wild birds. So they then become, in effect, indoors by the very nature of the fact there's no access to the outside. All this is skirted off, and no wild birds can get to them, because obviously I have a roof over the top and sides there, and for light they have that over there. So yeah, that's just my precautions for when we do get that calling from the ministry to look after your birds and house them inside, like. So yeah, we do have to cover them up on those situations. Something I don't like doing, but rules are rules, and try to follow them. They're there for reasons, I guess. But yeah, that's just one thing to consider. What precautions you have if the ministry calls for chickens to be housed out of the way of wild bird populations. If you suspect any of your chickens being ill, you will have to either contact a professional, a vet, or somebody who has qualifications in treating animals, or if it looks like something you can deal with yourself, do a bit of research online through books, or contacting people who have chickens for some advice. There are in a lot of the bigger pet stores, they now keep the basic remedies for looking after chickens, like apple cider vinegar, mite powder, and sprays like that, and you can get things for like all the other various illnesses that they get. But I have found over the 6 years we've been keeping chickens, as long as you keep their living quarters clean, free, give them room, don't overcrowd them, and the most important thing to avoid illness with chickens is clean water. Give them clean water. You really will solve a lot of your issues straight off the bat. But as for mites, you will know they got mites because they will be pecking and scratching, and on top of that rolling around more excessively than they usually do in the dirt. And even if you go into the hutch, You may find yourself just having a little scratch on your head, this, that and the other, and then you'll realise that yes, there is mites in there. Yeah, again, you can get sprays and powders and solve that quite quickly. With chickens, they're very seasonal with their egg production, and align that with particular breeds, you won't get eggs all the time. As you can see, I've got a lot of feathers inside my main run, and the chickens are looking a little bit disheveled. That's because they're molting. They will molt and lose feathers. While they're doing that, egg production will be down, and in particular low light conditions, which is what we have here in the UK at the moment. Yeah, so out of these 5 hens I've got here, I can expect 1, maybe 2 eggs a day, whereas in the peak summer months I can expect possibly even up to a full 5, and that takes some eating if you're getting 5 a day. I have one chicken which is of a specialist breed, the cream leg bar, which is that grey blue one, and that does lay a blue egg, which is nice for variety and something different. They do come with their own set of problems. They're a little bit more fickle to keep, so the breeds that are bred solely for egg and commercial use, which are basically these brown and white ones, they're probably your best bet, and you'll be able to find out online and through books a little bit more about all this particular topic. But I would stay away from the specialist breeds if you're starting up. Like I said, they come with their own set of problems, and they do tend to be, shall we say, just that little bit more finicky when you're keeping them. So yeah, just get the basic chickens that you can find in your area, which are basically the more commercial varieties, and they will serve you better, particularly in egg production, shall we say, part of keeping chickens, because they have been bred for eggs, and they will push eggs out and keep you they'll keep you, shall we say, excited about going down and getting the eggs in the morning, where the other breeds, like I said, the cream leg bar, it's nice to see a blue egg, but they're not, shall we say, as prevalent, and they won't lay all the time. Change your location, had to pop out. Just talking about roosters or male chickens, I don't keep any because obviously, as I've just shown you, I have neighbours and I don't want to upset them. I keep the chickens for eggs basically, and if I want to replace one, I then go and search out one and replace it. The other thing is, as I pointed out earlier on in the video, I don't let my chickens roam, quite simply because they will scratch up the ground. You have to take that into consideration, and they do defecate, and obviously I've got young children running around the garden, so hence that is another reason that I keep them penned. And another problem, which I've shown you in one of my other videos, I do have a big fox population hunting in the fields behind me, rabbits, so I'm not looking to cause myself any more trouble by worrying about where the chickens are. Yeah, my setup is quite easily, or can quite easily handle 5 chickens, possibly 6 at a push, but it's 5 is about right for egg production for myself, and without overstretching my, shall we say, run and the ability to keep them healthy and happy. You will have to decide on the amount of room you want to give your chickens, but I strongly suggest that you do give them as much room as you can afford. The more room you give them, the healthier the chickens and the better quality of eggs. My chickens are open to the environment, so they get the natural light, natural environment. As I said, their egg production's affected by the seasonal weather conditions, and that just all shows in the quality of eggs, and they've got enough to scratch around in. I've made it as best I can for them to have naturally happy environment is what you should be doing. But yes, I strongly suggest you give them as much room as you can afford them. Some of the commercial pens, obviously, they don't seem to have the required amount of room. If you can have an add-on run that you can adapt to fit that, which you can move around your lawn or area, shall I say, all the best. But yeah, as much room as you can afford them. I have stated that, with chickens, problems with the rodents can occur, and they do occur from time to time, particularly in the autumn and winter when they themselves are looking for somewhere to gain, somewhere to get food and be out of the weather, and they will try to live close by to that source of food. It is your duty as a chicken keeper to ensure that you do not let any population get out of control, for yourself, your neighbours and the chickens themselves. So you will have to bear that in mind. Unfortunately, that's something that you're going to have to contend with. It's just one of those things with keeping chickens, and it's part of a natural cycle and order of things. So yeah, you will have to be prepared to deal with that. I keep myself on top of that. I've always got a bait station on the go, a proper one, which the kids and other animals can't get into or get to, and I have other means which I do dispose of the rats should they become an issue. Although, like I said, because I'm on top of it, I've never experienced a real problem. I might get the odd one or two here or there, but that's by the by. I don't have or never had a serious problem with them. But that's simply because I'm keeping on top of it, and obviously you will have to monitor and do the same. Yeah, I quickly touched on the subject of how and why you would want to keep chickens in a small backyard garden scenario, and that also brings with it, are you going to be treating them as a meat bird or an egg bird, which ironically might not sound a bit of an issue, but if you become attached and they become more like pets, you will naturally have to deal with the fact that a chicken will stop laying eggs or not produce that much, and you will still be feeding it. That might sound obvious, but the fact of the matter is, you then paying for a chicken which is not giving you anything in return. That's fine if you've fallen in love with the animal and the animal has become a close member of your, shall we say, pet fraternity or your household. But for a majority of people, once a chicken reaches an age where it's not laying, you then have to decide, are you keeping that chicken, or are you going to, shall we say, cull it? That might sound harsh, but that is the reality of all forms of farming. I give it the best life I can, but once egg production is no longer viable from that particular hen, obviously I cull it, and I replace that hen at the nearest opportunity. I can expect 2 to 3 years from a chicken, and as you've seen, they get a good outdoor quality of life, and they're valued members of our, shall we say, household, and we look forward to going down every morning, getting eggs and the whole routine of it. And it does bring you back to nature, and you can see where those eggs and how it's all being produced. Yeah, so you will have to bear that in mind. If you're going to keep them and you do become attached and they become pets, you will have to accept that that chicken could live for a number of years without producing any eggs, and that's perfectly acceptable. But you may not have the room to keep replacing those chickens in that manner, and waiting for them to naturally expire. So you will have to consider that as part of your keeping process. Also, you will have to consider the legal aspect of keeping chickens in your area, region, or on your property. Unfortunately, that's a way of life these days, but yeah. To be honest with you, most districts and areas and that are pretty relaxed about it, providing you're on top of the looking after them, the welfare, maintenance, any smells, noises, and any rodents. As long as there's no issues with that, I can't really see it being a problem. But it is always worth checking because, as I was saying, a lot of areas are a lot stricter than others. But yeah, once you got the chickens, you will enjoy keeping them, and they do become part of your routine, and you will look forward to going down to see how many eggs you got each morning. So yeah, happy chicken keeping.